I'd like to call our next impacted witness, a young man who's been involved in the criminal justice system, who's seen the ins and outs of policing here in Charlotte, and who has been able to redeem his life after a considerable struggle throughout this process, Mr. Arkevious Armstrong. Mr. Armstrong will have questions asked of him by Reverend Dr. Sheldon Shipman, and Mayor Jennifer Roberts will offer a opportunity to listen and respond to his testimony. Mr. Arkevious Armstrong, I ask that you would take the next 7-10 minutes to share your thoughts and your testimony, after which we will begin to ask questions of you.
I was a young man who struggled again with trying to find my way, trying to find my identity. And, with having the many issues that I had coming up, it wasn't to me by surprise that, I saw a lot of young men like myself. And again, I had my brothers, I had mothers, my father who was also going in and out the system. And so coming from an environment where, the violence was very high, the drug activity was very high. And, you saw it. You saw police brutality. You saw police wrongfully just pulling people over just because they come down a certain street. You saw police drawing their guns on people who were just standing or sitting in the front of the yard, just gathering and having. You saw all of these things as a young kid. I used to see on a day-to-day basis where, you can be standing outside playing and 10 police officers might run up from out of the path, and just get everybody on the ground and put guns to the back of their heads. I've also, as a young man, I witnessed my mom on 2 different occasions. At the time she was struggling with her drug addiction, but I saw my mom on 2 different occasions been drugged out of a house and a shotgun pointed to the back of her back. And, as a young man, I think I had to been no more than like 7 or 8 years old playing outside to witness that. It was traumatizing. And so what we have in what we see in today in society, and, it's not to point the finger at everybody, but at the same time, we have to address the elephant in the room. What we see is young people of color are emotionally traumatized, psychologically traumatized, and fed up, tired, and sick and tired and looking for something to change. And me personally, I understand the frustration because I witnessed it. I understand the pain because I also endured it. And I understand it from a aspect of the fear of many officers that aren't like that, but those who are the officer that single people out, target people, wrongfully plant things or pull people over or stereotype or whatever the case may be. It looks bad on all the officers. And so, the whole department get a bad rep for a few bad apples, and I see that now because partnering with CMPD, partnering with the sheriff's office to bring something to where we can bridge the gap, where we can have some type of understanding between the community and not just in the Black community, but I just, when media put Black on anything, it catches wildfire, period. But trying to bridge a gap and create a relationship and the understanding between law enforcement and our youth today. Right currently, I have a nonprofit called Step Up to Leadership, where we focus on decision making, conflict resolution, and interpersonal skills and social development, social and personal etiquette, to where all of these things play a huge influence and role on how you interact with people, not just law enforcement, but with just people, period. But let's keep this thing on track. What this whole purpose is, what we're talking about, the justice system, law enforcement. I truly believe that you cannot train a person enough to have a heart, period. I don't care how many officers we put in the Black community. If it's not in their heart to have compassion, if it's not in their heart to have understanding, if it's not in their heart to want to serve that community, you can't make a person be what we want them to be. And I feel like you have to also look at that. We have to dig deeper in who we are giving these these individuals these badges and this power, and how we are trusting them to go in these communities and to protect and serve. And so again, my experience is always something that I always rely on because I experienced it. I was beat up by police officers. I was shot by a police officer. I never was shot. I was shot at by a police officer. I was maced by a police officer. And my whole thing is that everything, and I'm not wanting to finger, and I try not to blame people for my own mistakes and my own issues that I had. But I'll always be transparent to say that everything that I did, I cost on myself. Was it justified for me to have a gun pointed to my head? No, that's all in training. But there's ways we can go about things, and that's what I teach the youth today. To it don't take nothing but a second to think. You know what I mean? Think before we do things. Think before we say things. Think before we respond to things. Because sometimes if we make the wrong decision or choice, it can be detrimental. It can be life. It can be life changing, or it can save your life. And so that's what I encourage every young man that I come in contact with. When we do talk about this stuff, like the law enforcement, when we do talk about the violence, when we do talk about the killings, it's not just with law enforcement. With civilians, is the violence that we have in the communities today. I pride myself on letting them know about the effective results of communication skills, and how we try to show them that when you have effective communication skills, you either can learn how to listen without wanting to respond to things, as well as learning to talk with your body and not always with words. And so, man, I hate to sound like I'm all over the place, but it's a sensitive subject, and it's not just one sided. And I think we got to look at it on two sides, and not just what law enforcement isn't doing. Again, I was a person who I was facing 24 years to life for attempted murder charge at 13. And so, but when you look back, I feel like the justice system should have gave me more options, or could have gave me more options, knowing that this young man didn't have a fair shot or a fair chance coming up, and let alone this young man don't have support. And taking that whole thing into consideration to say, listen, let's see what other options we can offer this young man and try to save his life, let alone just try to throw him in prisons. And hopefully that this sentence, that this 4 sentence that we're going to give him, that he'll hopefully change his life around. But it didn't happen, because I came home at 17 with no resources, no help, no hope, and no structure. I went right back to the same environment, around the same people, with a different mindset, but just worse. So I got locked back up again at the age of 19, facing 35 years to life for another attempted murder charge that I committed. And again, it's me taking accountability of my own actions, me taking accountability of the decisions I made that caused me to be in the positions, in the situations that I got myself into. And those are some of the things that we got to take into account when you're selling drugs. You know what I mean? Again, I'm not just pointing a finger at the justice system. And I tell people this too, that I have programmed inside of Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office department or office, do I tell the inmates who coming home that, listen, we have to learn to stop now, because if we don't stop now, the chances are when you want to get your life together, people is not going to give you a chance. And we have to take that into account, And so with me, I think when I had the resources, I didn't have the help, I relied back onto the streets. I put my focus back into what I knew best, is how to sell drugs and how to rob. And so it got me back in the same position, back in the same circumstances. But now here it is, I'm facing another life sentence. I ended up signing a 10-year plea. I did 7 years on a 10-year plea, came home, made a commitment to myself to change my life around. So that's why I've been devoting my time and efforts and energy on helping change the narrative in the young men today, because they need to see, hear, and understand from a person who lived it, experienced it, and has also walked that same path that they're probably walking or consider walking. So again, my whole thing is this: if we can help create a relationship with law enforcement, will be good. But we also have to understand we have to help these people that's in these communities to bridge the gap between what they need to have in these communities, to create these programs within these communities. And I will always say that we can't rely on law enforcement or the justice system or the community or the criminal system to be the difference maker or to make a difference. We have to we have to have that weight on our own shoulders. So again, without that being said, man, I just feel like, you know, the law enforcement, the justice system, you know, they have, you know, it wasn't created to be fair from the beginning. You know, we've been fighting this fight for many years, and you know, we got to get the right people. We got to elect the right people, and we got to also hold ourselves accountable at the same time. So we can't holler about what police is doing when we ain't doing our own work in our own communities. And that's just being straight up and honest. You know, I mean, not to step on no toes. There's a lot of community leaders here in Charlotte. There's a lot of pastors here in Charlotte. There's a lot of people who can make a great difference in these communities. But you know, we got to put this weight on our shoulders and make the difference ourselves. And I hate I got so much going on right now. I came on a little late, but you know, I just want to just say that much for the most part.
Brother Armstrong, this is Reverend Shipman. I want to say to you, first of all, appreciate your authenticity. I appreciate your transparency. I have to say, as a father, I have 26-year-old twins, and one is a young man. And I'm just grateful for the inspiration that you've given us. I hope it's going to make all of us better and better parents. When I listen to you talk about being beaten and maced and shot at, the trauma that not only you have gone through, how does this racial injustice and things that you have gone through, how is it still affecting your life even today?
And thank you for the question. I think with me putting myself in positions to be interactive with law enforcement, to have a relationship with law enforcement, it has given me a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You know, again, I was a young man who grew up with no guidance, no structure, no father figure. I didn't have no male role model. So the only thing that I saw was selling drugs and taking anything that you want, take it. That was something I was taught. So, you know, I teach young men that if you're selling drugs out here, if you commit crimes, you breaking and entering, you robbing people, you're breaking the law. Law enforcement job is to stop those type of things from happening. So we got to, you know what I mean? To me now, my whole view on law enforcement is kind of like somewhat different from a lot of people. Nico, you know, she expressed herself as her son was killed by law enforcement. That is something that she would never get over. Her son is not here no more. You know, she can't hug him. She can't talk to him. That is a trauma that she's going to have to live with forever, no matter how many law enforcement that can come in the midst of her, grieve with her, hug her. Her whole notion on law enforcement is going to be the same because one person made a decision and it caused a trickle effect with other people that's connected. So that's something different from me. You know, I'm still alive. I changed my life. You know what I mean? I make healthier choices now. And I realize that in order for me to make a difference, sometimes you have to connect and work with those who that almost, I won't say, well, like your adversary. You know what I mean? As the streets would say, your ops. But you know what I mean? Those ops, those adversaries are human beings too. You know, they have families too. They just chose this field as a career, and all of them really have a heart to make a difference. You just have some who just abuse it. So for me, Reverend, that I've changed my whole attitude and the way I view law enforcement tremendously. You know, it was one officer, even though I've been beat up, maced, shot at by police officers, all these things, I had one officer who did embrace me. I had one officer at a young age did embrace me. But it was like, to me, I had to also come in contact with other law enforcement. And I remember like Gary McFadden at the time and Chief Putney, you know, a lot of, you know, he catch a lot of flack, you know, a lot of people hate him, but I only can speak from a standpoint of what I got an opportunity to see from this man. And, you know, he showed me his heart. He showed me, you know, besides his position, his title, you know, he has a huge heart for the community. But it's people like that I have positioned myself to be around to give me a different perspective on law enforcement. So I don't know if that answered your question, but my whole outlook on law enforcement and things that I experience is different now than it was then.
Yes, sir. You almost answered two of my questions at the same time. That's some of your heroes. But I got to ask one more question. I know we're a little short on time, Dr. Sadler, but as I was listening to your whole testimony, you claimed and you said that there were no resources that were really available for you when you came out. That was trying to rehabilitate yourself, and it sounds like now that there's an organization that you even started, Step Up to Leadership, is acting as a resource now.
Mm-hmm.
If there was something that you would change in Charlotte, and I hate to use the magic wand trick, but if there was something that you had the ability to change to make things better in Charlotte, what would that be, considering what your life experience has been?
Direct resources, and not hidden resources. You know, some of these resources that is out here, and I can speak from my experience when I came home, Rev. There was a lot of rocks I had to try to lift up and look under. There was a lot of doors I had to knock. There's a lot of things that I had to do just to see what opportunity lies for me. And it makes it so frustrating and hard for young men, not just young men, but women as well, who's come from these prisons and they come back to these communities. They don't have the reliable transportation. They don't have the reliable means of people directing them. So when it's hard to find the resources, it makes it so frustrating and easy for those to go right back down the same road, down the same path, and reoffend easy. So if I had one wish, to make the resources more direct and visible for people, to where when they come home, you got from A to Z how to get back on track.
Dr. Sadler, I think even though I have about 16 more questions, I'm going to stop it right there. You've done a great job, Mr. Armstrong. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Roberts.
Yeah, so I want to, first of all, thank you, Arkevious, for your amazing courage and your amazing self-awareness and awareness of a system that has, okay, I'm getting a little emotional. I'm a mom, so
Yeah.
these things happen. But your awareness of a system, one thing really hit me, and that is that you felt the system wanted to throw you away.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear that from other folks, and it is, and then you felt targeted and traumatized. You saw your mother dragged out of the house. You saw the system not giving any resources, not offering any opportunity, assuming that you were going to end up as a throwaway person. And I just, when I hear you now, and I hear you with the courage to take that trauma and turn it into something bright, shining, and inspirational. One of the things I ask is, how can we have more Arkeviouses in the world? How can we teach other young people to have that courage, to have the ability to take something so traumatic and turn it into something so wonderful? I also heard you say that finding a role model was hard, and that there was one police officer who befriended you and showed you that relationships were possible. And it made me think the power of one.
Yeah.
And how any one of us that's listening today has the power to change a life.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you're changing dozens of lives every day. And again, as a mom, I really feel that we don't have enough youth programs. When I was mayor, folks would come and tell us about all these great programs they had for young people and how it helped keep kids busy and off the street and building good relationships. And we really, when you're an elected official, you hear the rosy stuff and you think, okay, great. We're meeting needs in a lot of places, and we're really not.
Right.
We're really not. And so your story is so powerful, and we need more people to hear that. There was something else that you said that is so insightful, and that is the responsibility of the media. And it is absolutely true that the media is part of this racial stereotyping. They are a huge part of it. And the way they depict people, the way they interview people, the language, the adjectives. And, until you said that, I hadn't really thought about the degree of their responsibility, because they also pick on the conflict. So we don't see the stories of people like you who are doing amazing things and became self-aware and found good role models, and now you're sharing with other young men. We don't hear those stories. We hear the stories of the people who are in the cycle of drugs and crime and getting locked up. And we see the pictures of people, with their hands behind their back in the jumpsuit. And that is part of the stereotype that people who look like me form from the media. And I just want to thank you for that. I think that may become part of our recommendations out of this, all these conversations, because that's something all of us have a role in.
Right.
And I could go on. I've got like 2 pages of notes about all the things I've learned from you. But I just want to say, sorry, I had to get up and Kleenex.
So,
I just want to say that as a former elected official and somebody who really deeply cares about our youth programs, I look forward to your help in figuring out how to fill the gaps,
right.
and how to make sure that no young man or young girl, young woman feels like that society wants to throw them away.
Right. And I thank you so much, Mayor Roberts. And I saw you a lot. Never actually had an opportunity to have a conversation with you in person. But I want to take the time out to say this, and I'm gonna make it real quick, is that, CMPD catch a lot of flack. They do. They make mistakes, like we all are human. We make mistakes. We have pastors on here. Listen, they're not the best. They make mistakes. And, I have to take my hat off, because CMPD have done a lot for me and my organization. And I pride on always giving acknowledgement to them, because every opportunity they get to highlight my influence and impact, they don't hesitate. I'm not a person who draws himself to the news or want to be on the news, want to be on the radio. I know the work that needs to be done in the communities, and I just go forth and just do the best that I can. But, if it wasn't from, I'm gonna say it again, if it wasn't from Chief Putney, when so many schools here in Mecklenburg, CMS schools, wouldn't allow my programs in the schools, he found funding to make sure we had funding to get in these schools. When I had opportunities to have programs in different counties and families couldn't pay, Chief Putney found the funds to fund these kids to be in my program. When these officers saw me picking kids up, knocking on doors in some of the worst communities here in Charlotte, signing kids up, Delahaye Court, West Boulevard, it was CMPD Rob Trajowski, I forgot his name, who reached out to a person and they donated a brand new van. So I take my hat off, because I get to see and sit down with these men and truly hear their heart. And, and it's not that they're doing things to pacify or to make themselves look good. These are some of the things they do in private. The media don't know, because they don't blow the whistle on what they do. But there are so many schools that couldn't fund or didn't have the financial means to allow my program to be in the schools. But when I went to Chief Putney at the time, he made it happen. And so, and to have these programs like we have now, virtual program, we got an empowerment virtual program go on every single Wednesday. We got kids from Minnesota, we got kids from Atlanta, we got kids from different parts of North Carolina, as well as Mecklenburg. We go hiking in 2 weeks. I'm taking the kids on a fishing trip, and we're going to grill. And it's just like, these kids is 14, 15, 16, 17 years old. and it's all about building relationships. And, you know, and I have great friends who are law enforcement. Some of them are white, some of them are black. And I always say, listen, always interact with my kids out of uniform. Why is that? I want them to see that you are human beings. I want them to see you as people and not as a law enforcement, because if they see you as who you are, then they won't look at or stereotype you. So again, I want to thank you for this opportunity, the platform, Mayor Roberts, all the reverends, everybody who's on here. You know, just thank you. Like I said, I'm not hard to find. I would love to have this platform to share with anybody or whatever y'all have going on. But again, thank you for everything. Like I said, it's nothing but God that's directing this whole thing for me.
No, thank you so much, Mr. Armstrong, for your testimony and all that you offered us tonight. Thank you, Dr. Shipman, and thank you, Mayor Roberts, in this regard.